Hello, everyone. We are back to the late show, or as it is called in the UK, the early show. And we are having another watch market update with El Famoso Profesor.
Good
Bienvenidos.
morning.
Good. Buenos dias. It's lovely to have you on board once again. Today we are um, a little more focused. I will just start with this very quickly because my friend, I love Maldives, shared it via email. He must have been listening in. I hope he's still here. We're talking
Hmm.
about Cartier quite a bit at the beginning and towards the end of the show. The Pasha is, of course, Gerald Janta design, perhaps one of his neglected designs. You have a white gold example here with an entire dial made of diamonds. Um,
Hmm.
this is retailed by Baya for right under 30,000 francs from year 1995, 35 millimeter in diameter. And Garantie, it says mit originaler Garantie und Box von Cartier, the box and papers. Diese Uhr wurde bei Cartier revidiert, aufgefrischt, kontrolliert und hat 2 Jahre Garantie. So it has 2 years of warranty from Cartier, and it has been revised, refreshed, and checked by Cartier. So fully serviced by Cartier. And zusätzlich, which means additionally, they give you another year of warranty. As you know, Baya is the oldest watch shop in the entire world. They have a beautiful museum as well. So if you're ever in Zurich, that's one location you have to go. You owe yourself a visit to Baya, to the shop, to the museum, and they're retailing this gorgeous example of a Pasha right under 30K in Swiss francs. Very, very cool. All right, so let's dive right in. This is the state of the industry, pardon me, that is published by SJX. It's a um, it's a collaborative effort between Morgan Stanley and Lux Consult that focuses on the entire Swiss watch industry. We will start at the end, actually, just to have a better idea of what their methodology is. But the large part of it is based on information, statistics, and numbers that the Federation of Swiss Watch Industry, FH for short, provides. And the exports apparently reached an all-time high, which was 22.3 billion Swiss francs in 2021, 21.2 billion of that for wristwatches alone. And here's the methodology part. And I want to read a part of it, just to have a background for our conversation. Unlike other industries, and this is something that the professor reminded us yesterday, like fast moving consumer goods, the watch industry is a black box, right? So it's not any luxury industry when it comes to the Swiss watch industry, because the transparency is not there, the regulation is not entirely there. Very few industry figures are published except for exports that are recorded by Swiss Customs and disseminated by FH, that Federation of Swiss Watchmaking Industry. Professor.
Yeah. No. I first of all, salutations to everybody. Greetings. Yeah. It really encapsulates what we have been saying, Lord, for a long time. That we're trying to understand an industry that is by nature and structure not transparent. So, yes, I think in this program, we have analyzed in the past the Federation of Swiss exporters, Swiss watch exporters, some of the numbers. But it's not segmented as we said yesterday. How much does one export and by what category?
Hmm.
What segment of the individual watch brand? Is it the Tank Americain, or is it the Pasha, or is it the Santos that Cartier exports, and what they produce? We have no clue what they're producing. We just know a total figure. So it is right to be saying what they're saying. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. All we know is here the number of units exported out of Switzerland, and how much that amounts to in terms of retail value percentage wise compared to the rest of the industry. So this is the Magnificent Seven that the report focused on, which is Rolex at number one, which is, as we said, basically has as much of a share as the next five. Cartier number two, Omega number three, Audemars Piguet number four, Longines number five, Patek Philippe number six, and Richard Mille number seven.
Absolutely. And if you look at the table that shows from 2017 to 2021, the progression of the ranking, you will see that there are certain changes. If you want to also go into, yes,
Hmm.
you will see that there are certain changes. The biggest of all is Cartier, which has unseated Omega in 2021 as the second largest, and Omega
Right.
being the third.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, you move down and you see that Audemars has moved up to be the fourth player, uh, and again unseating Patek Philippe, which was the fourth. Longines,
And
interestingly
and
enough,
also
yes,
Longines, by the way. I mean,
yes,
that's also significant. Audemars Piguet displacing Patek Philippe is one thing because we are talking about comparable numbers of production, etc. But compared to Longines, of course, you might expect that Audemars Piguet is much more exclusive, so they can't necessarily hang. But that's not necessarily true. They have overtaken them. And by the way, one addendum to the Rolex supremacy, which goes almost unquestioned. We are not even counting Tudor, right, which has been part of that top uh, 20 since 2019, and
hmm
it has been creeping up slowly but surely as well.
that's right. I think Tudor is the other big revelation in this. If you look at, for instance, the categories for 2017, Tudor is not there, nowhere to be seen.
Hmm.
And you go to 2018, again, nowhere to be seen. And suddenly they make an appearance in 2019 as the 18th player in the market. And then they start quite surprisingly and aggressively increasing their rankings
Hmm.
from being 18th in 2019 to being 14th in 2020, and then declining a little bit in 2021. But as you said, Tudor is right there.
The other thing I will say is Rado, for example, that represented somehow the entry level,
hmm
disappears in the last report, 2021. And by and large, the lower segment of the top 20 is now luxury brands that have otherwise the name recognition, even if they are not always known as big players in horology. So another aspect of this ranking and segmentation that echoes with what we have been saying on this channel is basically the disappearance of the entry level luxury watch that seems to have lost the
Exactly.
battle by and large to the Apple Watch, to the smartwatch. And nowadays, the mechanical watch is recognized truly and simply as a luxury product. So now you have the names of Bulgari, Hermes, Chopard, Van Cleef, Appels, and brands like that occupying perhaps that lower segment of the top 20. But no longer Rado, no longer Swatch, um, so on and so forth. So there's an interesting shift already developing there as well, which is something we will see more and more, I think.
Well, funny enough, in 2021, um, there are two patterns I see. One is that uh, JG Lecoultre is consistently declining in ranking, um, and then Vacheron, which is also declining in ranking, with the exception of 2021, which just witnessed a slight increase.
Hmm.
Both of them are kind of declining. And out there is an interesting brand which we have spoken in the past, but also falling in ranking consistently year after year,
Mm.
which is Tissot.
Right.
And I think this is what you're saying, Lord, is that it is consistently the entry level brands are falling. Tag Heuer is declining. Tissot is again declining.
Hmm.
Rado disappearing. Blancpain gone. Um, and they're struggling at the very bottom. Although Chopard is a very expensive brand. Van
Yes.
Cleef is very expensive. Panerai still it's a pricey one, not entry level, so it seems there is a lot of competition there.
But I think also, since these brands that you are counting for the most part also belong to a certain group, I guess we can think of it as kind of shifting strategies within the Swatch group and changes in priorities as well. Because at the end of the day, even though they have their own autonomy, um, Breguet is part of the Swatch group. Tissot is part of the Swatch group. Longines is part of the Swatch group. Omega is part of the Swatch group. Harry Winston is part of the Swatch group. Hamilton, so on and so. I mean, I can count for an entire day just the brands that they own. So it's hard to keep track of them, but I feel like there's an interesting segmentation happening there. Um, I have argued in the earlier broadcast that Cartier has been building that momentum already at the turn of the century, basically, 1998 onwards. So it's a well earned rise, and it's not something that happened overnight. Um, because it's already an achievement, anyways. Before they overtook Omega to be number three
Mm.
consistently, that's not nothing, right? To be above Patek Philippe, to be above Audemars Piguet, to be above Longines, Tissot, Tag Heuer, so on and so forth. So it's something that they have been building with a very conscious blend of aesthetic vision, a certain commitment to their archives and heritage in terms of the designs, and some integration through their collaborations in Richemont and beyond with horological innovators as well. So that place is well deserved, I think.
And I think it's important to also say a few things about the sales, the revenues of
Mhm.
each brand. I think that will be good.
Please, Professor.
So there is this pie chart, if we go to the pie chart, Lord, at the very beginning,
This one?
yes, um, that kind of shows you. Although you said it at the very beginning, um, the biggest of all is, of course, the crown of all crowns uh, in the estimation of the turnover. Again, it's an estimation because nobody is releasing this. I mean, Rolex doesn't say, and the others don't say a lot. But Rolex is at 8 billion Swiss francs in 2021, and they're 28.8% of the market. Um, and then Cartier is at 6.9 and Omega at 7.5. So
Hmm.
the second place in terms of turnover is Omega at 2.2 billion sales. So you can see the difference, 2.2 versus 8 billion.
Right, guys.
Uh,
Just to add that those numbers, you add nine more zeros to them, right? So that's 8 billion and 2.4, 2.2, so on and so forth.
yeah. Sorry, I'm reading it. Sorry, it must be I'm not drinking enough coffee. So the second place is Cartier at 2.39 billion, and third place it's Omega at 2.2 billion in sales. So Rolex 8 billion, Cartier 2.39, and then Omega 2.2 billion. And from there on, the rest is kind of around there and falling. Um, Audemars is at 4.2% in terms of retail sales, total sales, and then, Longines, Patek Philippe. And then the entrant to the billion Swiss franc group is RM, Richard Mille, which finally made it to this unique group of billionaires of
Mm.
a billion sales worth of sales for 2021. So it's pretty impressive if you think about it. I think you did say to me yesterday, Lord, something important. You said, um, was it you or was it my wife? No, it was no, my wife. You see, I confuse you now in terms of importance. So my wife said to me, hey, listen, professor, yeah, whatever. Um, do they actually produce 1,050,000 watches and they sell all these watches each year? And I say, yeah, they do. They don't hoard them. They don't put them in a vault. They do end up selling them. Yes, and it is an amazing feat of marketing that they do.
and and let's also make the distinction. Rolex ends up selling them. uh some ads, including those prestigious conglomerate ones, might be hoarding them at certain points in time, but Rolex itself produces to sell. They don't have like in the Bond movie Goldfinger some sort of special vault where they keep all their gold and all their precious Rolex watches. So they do actually produce to distribute.
Like all of them, I don't think any of them is hoarding the watches. I mean, they have to sell them. Um,
Well, wasn't it Enzo Ferrari who said always make one car less than demanded? So I'm sure they're making just enough,
yeah,
not
just
saving
enough.
any.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So this is really the report for 2021 and um  2022. I'm not sure how it's going to look like. Of course, Rolex will be number one. What will be interesting is to see variation between second and third, and then fourth. Probably Audemars will be up there because of the 50th anniversary, all of these things that they're coming up. and there is a lot of noise around their name. Even if I believe that the Royal Oak, I'm sorry to say, guys, is a great ingenuity, great invention of one man, which everybody else at Audemars has capitalized. Is this bad? No, I don't think so. Let me say the opposite. They might say, hey, but why is this bad? You know, Rolex produces the professional piece or the Datejust piece in the same way over the last, decades, six,
Yeah,
seven
I think
decades.
one thing is that, like, again, the two of us, we are in many ways as analytical as we want to be, as critical we want to be. At heart, we are still Rolex fanboys. So we can say this, but Rolex is usually given the exception, right? When Tudor has Black Bay, people don't recognize that as the definition of the case, right? That goes through the line and that's executed in so many different ways. People criticize Tudor. Oh, you're only making Black Bay. You're focusing on a single brand, single model.
Hmm.
Same thing with Audemars Piguet. You're only making Royal Oaks. No one tells Rolex, you're only making oysters, right? Because except for the Cellini, now there's one model, the Cellini Moonface. Rolex only makes oysters, but they're all different watches. Just like Audemars Piguet makes Royal Oaks, and they're different from each other. Maybe still a little bit too much of a single-minded focus, right? We can fine-tune that criticism, but we always make an exception for Rolex. It never fails. You know, Rolex gets away with murder and does one thing right, and suddenly, they are again, at the top of the world. They can invert the caliber in one watch and sell it, decorate it in a different color bezel and sell it to us as a new watch, and we will embrace it. It will be a hit.
Yeah, I think they all of them are making big bets, and many of them, if not all, again, I don't want to exaggerate, they seem to be successfully making it. Whether whether it's Rolex or Audemars, I think Vacheron hasn't really moved into the. I assume the Royal Oak is in terms of revenues is producing upwards of 70, close to 80% of their income.
Are,
The Royal
are
Oak.
are we talking about Audemars Piguet or
Yes.
Vacheron and
No, no.
overseas?
Yeah, no, no. I'm just making the point. Royal Oak, I think, is producing 80%, close to 80% of AP's revenues. And in the case of Vacheron, they haven't moved into that one single-minded uh, um, production of one model. You know, the overseas try to overtake, but it never.
Right.
I don't think it commands 70% of their sales.
No, and some might say thankfully. But then again, let's remember these numbers are 2021, right? They don't quite capture the most recent happenings, whether we're talking about the incoming recession and how hard it will hit. We're not talking about the Ukraine crisis yet, but the numbers are still encouraging insofar as that the 2021 saw the Swiss watch exports go up 31.2%
Hmm.
compared to 2020. And even as the report notes here, the Morgan Stanley Lux Consult report, 2.7% higher than 2019. So these are encouraging numbers, but we will have to see, of course, how 2022 will unfold and how we will see it in the rear view mirror. And my guess is the numbers won't see this sort of 30 plus percent growth, but I'm not going to speculate on the actual number.
Yeah. Plus, you need to account for the increase, the price increase that all of them are instituting. Most notably, the Rolex did one in January, did another one recently a few weeks ago for the UK, Australian market. I think one other one as well. Will they do another one in January? I'm not sure. Um, Rolex doesn't do one each year, so and it is quite predictable. To the comment that no, it's unpredictable. That's the only predictability that Rolex has. That they do an increase. It's usually every 2 years, but it will depend also on the fluctuation of the dollar because the dollar is the cause for the most recent increase, 5% increase in the UK and Australian market. Um, the UK market, by the way, is the second largest in the Western world. So after the US, which is the largest um, in the Western world, the UK is the second largest. So it is a very important market for them. So it will depend on the pound. If the pound keeps on falling, remember, you guys sitting in the US can fly and buy your watches if you can find them, of course, at a retailer, at an authorized dealer, but you can buy them and actually hedge because you'll be buying it 20% discounted on the currency basis. You hold on to the watch and eventually currencies appreciate and depreciate. You already make up for the difference. So that's a hedge. And Rolex and any other brand doesn't like to have these hedges.
Mhm.
Very simple. It's when you look at your Apple iPhone, the price is not the same in the UK and the US market. It's based on currency fluctuation and also cost of living and all of that
Mhm.
stuff. So, yeah.
But by the way, the yes, UK is not only the second biggest in the Western world; it's also in the Western Hemisphere, so to speak. It's also it's also within top five overall as well. So it's UK is still important. Central European markets are not insignificant, right? They might not have as much volume as US, as China, but that doesn't mean that Germany is not important, that Italy is not important. These countries actually have always had an oversized importance in relation to the health of the watch market. So let's keep that in mind as we are looking forward to a difficult winter, or as we are bracing ourselves really for a difficult winter in Europe, in continental Europe, and in the UK.
And of course, recently, just the other yesterday, it was officially said that in 2023, Germany and Italy are going to be entering a recession. And Italy is a very big market for watches, as is Germany, notwithstanding the purist in the Germans. Still, it's a very big market for the watch industry. And
Mm,
if they are entering a recession or they are in a recession, that means that obviously they'll sell fewer watches. Of course, there are certain resilience that defines Italy and the UK only because it is a tourist destination. There are something like what 70, 80 million people visiting Italy every year, tourists, that is. I might be missing, I might be above that number by 10 million, but still you got 70, 80 million visiting Italy, and you have another 70, 80 or 90 visiting the UK. So over the summer, London is flooded by all kinds of people, especially from the Middle East, who flock with their Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and they move into. I was told by an authorized dealer the other day that they come in and they try to bribe outright authorized dealers just to get the watch from the exhibition window. Um, so, so they benefit from these tourists and others who come in. So it's not as if it's like the let's say the seasonality market in Portugal or other places. They do have tourists, but Italy and the UK are very popular destinations, as is France.
No,
So
look, I
they
mean
benefit.
that's exactly how it works. By the way, that's exactly how these flippers and the gray marketeers get watches. They have used the same bribing system. It's just not as it's more under the cover, so to speak. It's more through the back door. They do pay, 5 to 10K depending on the watch. Sometimes even as little as $1,000
Hmm.
premium, um, and buy these watches and turn around and sell them for profit. So yeah, I don't begrudge, the end customer for trying the same tricks. I don't want to live in that world. I don't i don't want to come to terms with that approach to buying watches, because for me, again, it's about building a collection. It's about making them part of your life and part of your style. It's about wearing and enjoying them first and foremost. But I don't begrudge the end customer for using the same tricks of people who have basically destroyed the hobby in the last few years. So that's all I will say.
Absolutely. Um, I was looking at one of them, one of the authorized dealers, and one of the sales agents. Let's put it this way. And I don't know if they're authorized or unauthorized anymore. One should describe them as unauthorized, authorized agents. She was wearing Louis Vuitton shoes. Probably they were costing upwards of £1,000. She was also wearing a real Daytona steel, panda,
Beautiful.
white face, and the clothes were probably worth as much as the entire clothes of that day of my family. So,
That's very
you
good.
um,
It's very
and
good.
I
Business
said
is
to
good.
myself, what is going on here? This one is making more money, or she looks, she's more. She dresses in a very
Can I
expensive way.
can I tell you a story? I won't reveal any names or locations, but in one of the boutiques of the big four brands here, last time I went, I dealt with an exact same type of person, um, who was the sales associate. And when I went into that boutique the last time, she was no longer working with us. So,
Oh,
um, an interesting fate awaits those kinds of people who are taking bribes and who are doing backdoor deals and who are flipping watches as well as being paid and employed by one of these brands. An interesting fate awaits them usually at the end of the road. So they should be careful. I have also heard that these some of these people are under criminal investigation currently. So it's I wouldn't envy them. They can wear as much luxury as they want. The orange the orange jumpsuit trumps them all. So they should be really careful.
well said. Well said.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe does the orange jumpsuit that they issue upon arrival, does that come with the monogram or damier or a different kind of Louis Vuitton design?
I don't. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I don't. I don't know. It's look. It's an interesting phase that I've been observing the watch industry, Lord, as you know, for since the early 2000s. Only because a very close member of my family worked for one of the top four. Um, I will be very transparent for the top one in the United States. So I got to know a little bit of the inside story to it. And I've been following them only because later on I was able to participate a little bit more actively in that world. And then I always liked collecting and looking well, a particular brand, obviously, which is the Crown. Um, for wrong or for right, I don't know. That's how it happened. But I think now we live in a very different phase. Back then, for many years, watch collecting and the hobby of observing the watch industry was really not an obscure hobby, but it was not, like playing golf. You
Oh, it
couldn't
was,
find.
it was, I think, in terms of coolness, watch collection was like a notch above collecting stamps and first edition novels, I think. Like it was a little cooler than that, but certainly not very cool.
Yeah, it wasn't very cool. Yeah, I mean, you would say, oh, he likes watches, and people would look at you and say, what? He likes watches. Suddenly today, people look at your wrist to ascertain if you're good, bad, wealthy, poor, and all of that nonsense that people want to define in their minds. But
Unfortunately,
back then it was really obscure. It was like I would walk into a shop and you would see all of the watches lined up, all of them, and they would hunt you to get you to decide to buy something. I mean, today you're hunting them, and
it's
yeah,
it's going back to the new normal. I think it's gonna happen sooner than later. You were talking about your experience of paying more recent visits and receiving certain calls from boutiques. It is becoming a buyer's market again, but it was a different time. It was a different time, and I don't think there's a return to
no,
that normal for sure, where you would have cases overflowing with an entire selection. Now you go to some of the better equipped Rolex boutiques, and cases are full of so-called exhibition models. That was the case usually of the boutiques, of the authorized dealers, stocked with the normal inventory. You would go in, and yes, there wasn't a Daytona. You had to be on a wait list and maybe a special customer to get one sooner than later. But everything else, at most, you would wait for 2 to 3 months. Like it was entirely reasonable, for example, for your significant other to go to an authorized dealer in advance of your birthday and say, "Hey, you don't have it, but you can get it for November." Yes, absolutely. That's it. Um, and yes, they were like on precious metal pieces, 20% off by default. It's not there weren't there weren't mythologies around like John Mayer Daytona. They couldn't give them away at the discount. You could still negotiate. No, I want 25% off. That's not moving anytime soon. Or the day dates, for example, right?
oh,
It's a
the day
different
dates
time.
were not moving; they were sitting there, and you would get a 15% discount. Um,
By
now,
default, that's where the
by
conversation starts.
Yes, yes, yes. Today I asked, well, not today, but some time ago, I asked for just a ordinary innocent question. Oh, when can I get, I would like to get, I said, the day date, green dial, yellow gold.
Mm,
The guy looked at
mm.
me, he said to me, sir, there are 10 other people waiting for that watch, and we know we're going to get only one in the next 5 years. I said, okay, wow. Even for a day date, I said. He said, yes. Well, he said, what I can do for you is I can give you the yellow gold Submariner, um, blue dial. I said, no, I don't like that. I'm not into that kind of thing. I said, I want the green one. He said, no, impossible. So this kind of discussion, it never happened back then. You couldn't have it.
So a short, a quick change of gears um, is about the segmentation of the market, and I want to just read this off the report because it's very nicely summed up. The five most important brands represent more than half of the market, right? We were talking about how the entire market, even the top 20, tends towards luxury, right? Very much less affordable entry level luxury left at this point, at this very competitive level. 13 brands have 75% of the market share, while the 25 brands have 90% of the market. And this is of all 350 different Swiss watch brands. So it says the entry level segment in Swiss watchmaking is undeniably suffering from the onslaught of smartwatches. 80 million smartwatches were sold last year, compared to barely 16 million Swiss watches. Compare this to 2016,
Mm-hmm.
first full year of sales for the Apple Watch, right? It's just like yesterday, but it's already 6 years and a lot has changed, which remains the leader in the segment with 50% of the market share. That year, 2016, 22 million smartwatches were sold. That number has quadrupled by now, while Swiss watchmaking sold 25 million watches, of which 18 million were quartz. So look at that number, right? The quartz Swiss watch is disappearing. The affordable Swiss watch, i.e., the 2,000 Swiss franc for export, roughly 4,000 Swiss franc at retail, that segment and below is fast disappearing, right? The everything is becoming premiumized. Um, so that's an important trend to keep in mind, and I don't see a reversal in that at all.
If anything, this is going to grow, and they will continue to infiltrate in this market. Of course, they cannot go higher, and what is happening is that the industry, which is at mid tier, which includes Rolex, by the way, Rolex is a mid tier priced watch. They will keep on increasing, so they rise into this higher price point, not because somebody said it, it's because they want to compete with Patek. There is no way. Rolex does not want to compete with Patek and cannot compete with Patek. So they will not get into this market of 30,000 and 40,000. Yes, of course, over time, inflation will account for that, and it will rise to 40,000 in 20 years and 30 years for sure. If you just do an extrapolation of a linear increase, it will get to 30,000, the Daytona, no doubt. Huh? Because the GMT was 4,000 in the early 2000s.
Well, also, by the way, the numbers are there. Do you think Patek is trying to be like Rolex, or Rolex is trying to be like Patek? So
No, no, I
that's
don't
the
think
insight.
anybody.
No, I
Both of
mean,
them are not.
because
Yeah,
some people, some people use that as a mantra. Tudor is trying to be Rolex, Rolex is trying to be Patek, but they're
no.
missing the point, like you said, because Rolex, again, Rolex is right now, when you put the numbers of Cartier, Omega, Audemars Piguet, and Longines together, that's Rolex, right? So, and Patek Philippe comes after that top five at this point. They're different kinds of products. Yes, they all belong to this luxury Swiss mechanical watch category, but the situation is not even comparable.
No, I don't. I vehemently believe that Rolex is not trying to be a Patek. It's impossible to be a Patek, first of all, in terms of production. Patek produces 67, 68,000 pieces. Rolex is, a million plus and going. And the reverse, Patek cannot be a Rolex in terms of production, does not want to be. Although in the Swiss industry, uh, the two brands are very close to each other in terms of respect. And you only get that when you visit frequently Switzerland and you talk to both companies. They actually have a lot of respect for each other.
Mhm.
You don't see this respect, this mutual admiration and respect between Vacheron and Audemars. I don't think there is. There are certain subtle differences, and of course, within the industry, nobody, I would say, likes Richard Mille. um, Not really likes. It's not the right term, but they don't understand. They do understand what he has done, which is produce watches for billionaires and millionaires. Um, but they think that it is excessive. But anyway, it used to be a seller's market for a long time, and uh, Richard Mille benefited from that.
Yes. What do you think about this particular point that they're making, where the writers of the report seem to be privileging privately owned brands, increased polarization of the market, which is now led by a few brands that have outperformed for years, and are privately held: Rolex, Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, and Richard Mille. And of course, in each case, this is a different kind of private ownership, but they have kind of glossed over that. We can now add Breitling to this list, although Breitling is owned by private equity as opposed to a family, which is making remarkable progress with a 40% increase in revenue. These five brands represent almost half of the Swiss watch market, with 43% of the industry sales. What do you think about the point they are making there, or that they are implying?
Mm. Yes, I was thinking of what you were saying earlier about this. I mean, does it really benefit the brand if you are part of a bigger group, or are you benefiting being an independent, family owned? In the case of Rolex, it's a foundation, a very complicated foundation, but that's how
Mhm.
it is. Um, it seems that it's being a family owned business in the watch industry pays off for these brands. But having said this, I think the other ones could not exist separately. Or another idea, because I haven't yet concluded, is that these conglomerations, the mergers and acquisitions that took place in the Swiss watch industry from the 1990s onwards, which were defined by Hayek, Nicholas Hayek,
Mhm.
who was really the rejuvenator of the Swiss industry
Right.
out of the ashes of the quartz revolution in
I mean,
Japan.
look, a prophet, really, and I'm saying this as not being a fan at all of the Swatch Group, but you have to be fair and you have to recognize the kind of energy and revival he brought to the industry, and you have to
True.
give you have to give to Caesar what is Caesar's, as has been said. And also, we have to look. I don't disagree with the way they present their case here, and substantiate it, back it up by numbers. But you have to look at it by case by, you know really, case by case basis, because if you think, for example, and you have already insinuated this, would some of these brands even be there if they didn't have the luxury conglomerate behind them, right?
Yeah.
Um, think of Lange, for example, which is a brand that I love, which is a brand that I really like. But Lange did not exist as Lange for decades before before and during the World War II, except for wristwatches they were issuing to the military. They were making a very negligible number of wristwatches. They were mostly making pocket watches. If it weren't for Günther Blümlein and the Mannesmann capital behind him, IWC and JLC conglomeration in LMH, Les Manufactures Horlogères, reaching out to Walter Lange and reviving that brand in a certain way and building a high horology mark out of it, it wouldn't even exist today. We wouldn't have an A. Lange und Söhne if we didn't have the Mannesmann capital first, and then Richemont acquiring all three of these brands, IWC, JLC, and Lange in 2000. So we have to focus on each case and draw conclusions from that. What is bad for Girard Perregaux and Ulysse Nardin does not need to be bad for Lange. What is bad for JLC need not be so bad for Omega, right? We have to understand each example through its own standards and through its own success and failures.
Yeah, and also, if I may say so, I would add to this, Vacheron, which I have knowledge of, during prior to its acquisition, was facing dire problems. It was acquired, when was it? In the early 90s or late 80s, by a famous Saudi businessman.
Well, I mean, you and we know where the connections reach when you're talking about the Saudi businessman, I guess.
Yeah, the brand didn't do very well, even with the acquisition. And so it went downhill from there. Although it was, it is one of the top three outside of the Rolex. It's the Holy Trinity, so to speak. But it was
Right.
going downhill, and there was no end to its problems for a brand that was nearly bankrupt. It was bankrupt. I mean, it's not. I'm not revealing any information. It was really in dire straits, financial straits, and it had to be bailed out. And the issue is that back then in the 2000s, there were a lot of brands that had to be bailed out, and this is what Hayek instigated. Omega, and all the others followed. Longines, Tissot,
And it was
Cartier.
late 90s. It was late 90s when Richemont acquired Vacheron, right? That was
That's
before
right.
they got, yeah.
That's right. I remember Vacheron was having huge issues. Audemars, even bigger issues back then. Um, a lot of them were facing problems. Patek was never, you never knew what was going on, but Patek didn't have a problem because they produced 20,000, 25,000 watches back then, and they were all sold. It was at a high end. They had their clientele. It was a different structure, and they never expanded beyond their means. It was a very kind of Calvinist approach to their thinking. But all the others were, Jaeger was, JJ was facing huge problems.
Of
All of
course.
them were, I think. I mean, Rolex was probably the only one that was not, but they were back then producing what, 600,000 pieces. And, they had challenging times
Well,
to
I mean,
sell the pieces.
imagine, by the way, GG until 2000, 60% of it was of Les Manufactures Horlogères, so the German capital between IWC, JLC, and Mannesmann, and 40% was owned by AP. So AP, that didn't know what to do with itself, was trying to keep
Yeah,
Jaeger-LeCoultre afloat because they were depending on their tractor movements, on their reliable movements that have been powering so many of their um, self-winding sports models for such a long time. So it was an interesting time, and again, I think it's a little simplistic. I'm not saying this report is saying this, but sometimes people reading stuff like this end up simplifying and saying things like independence good, family ownership good, international conglomerate bad. And I think that's a little facile, right? And I'm glad we are driving some sort of nuance into that discussion, because a lot of the segments of this luxury mechanical watch market would not even exist if it weren't for the involvement of certain luxury groups. Some
Yeah,
have
I mean,
miserably failed. Some have miserably failed, like Kering. Others, like the Swatch Group, did wonders.
yeah, caring, yeah, as you said, miserably, and now they have to deal with the misery. Girard Perregaux is wondering what to do and how to do it. Wonderful brand, but in terms of existence, its future is dubious. It's uncertain. The same with Ulysse Nardin, and the same goes also, if I may say, well, not so much, but still on the brink is Parmigiani. Parmigiani is not doing very well in
Oh,
terms of sales.
Sandoz can't keep them afloat.
From my, insiders' story is that they're trying, struggling.
Mm.
It's not easy. You might be thinking that, okay, my God, Swiss watches are desired by everybody now,
Mhm.
but it is only the top tier that is desired. A lot of them that have these fantastic names, as we mentioned, for 100 plus years, are struggling right now. And then the issue is, who takes them over? How do they take them over? Who manages them? And a good example reference to this is Breitling. Breitling was acquired by a private equity group in 2021. It's open how much they were bought for $734 million. Um, Now probably they're worth, 3 4 times, and they were acquired by a huge private equity group, similarly to what was done in the 1990s. The case in point, Piaget, Investcorp, the Bahraini based private equity group. They got into the luxury market. They had also acquired a couple of other brands later on. Fantastic
Including
purchase.
Breguet, including Lemania.
Yes, they got involved in that, absolutely. And um, and Breitling is doing very well now. I mean, sales have fantastically gone up. The brand is back into the front of the category. People are very happy, and it's a turnaround story. But for some of the others, it's not a great story, and they are struggling. Especially, as I said, Girard Perregaux, I know for a fact they're having tough issues. Ulysse Nardin, tougher issues. And Parmigiani, again, less so than the first two brands, but still, you know, struggling. Um, Struggling less, but struggling. And if they don't sell, for how long can they sustain themselves? And the reason why a lot of these companies were sold is because they were having issues and they had to be acquired by somebody, and they survived because of that. Breguet would have had a huge issue. Lange disappeared for a while, in Leipzig, and reappeared again, fantastically well. But they reappeared using the platform of this, grand mothership, which always performs very well, and they have the financial means to support them. So they have done something. I mean, not to be discounting for Richemont's inclusion in this LVMH, they have done very well. Um, Otherwise, they would not have existed. But no, I don't buy this idea that Rolex wants to be a Patek. and Patek wants to be a super Patek, or what does, if Rolex wants to be a Patek, what does Patek do? Right? What, they just stay as Patek. But no, Rolex does not want to be a Patek. On the contrary, they will just keep on increasing their prices, but that increase is not going to be commensurate to being anywhere close to Patek. This is not their segmentation. Their segmentation is clear. If anything, they will produce more watches over time, and they will sell all of them, and they will have a fantastic marketing strategy, and people will continue to buy their first watch, and buy more of their watches. I think that is the Rolex strategy. And then, of course, Tudor, which comes along as being, the second. I don't want to say tier, because it's a very good watch, but it covers for that segment above the Apple Watch, between the the 3,000 to 4,000 segment, and that they seem to be doing well.
So two small points as we conclude. I want your opinion on this. The report notes that Swatch Group had a healthy growth of about 30%, which was right under the average growth of the Swiss watch industry in terms of its exports. But the report notes it has been increasingly dependent on its three top brands out of 17 for both revenue and profit. Two-thirds of turnover is generated by Omega, Longines, and Tissot. Omega alone is estimated to generate more than half the group's operating profit. What happens in this configuration to the other Swatch Group brands that are not named Omega, Longines, or Tissot?
Yeah, what happens, you mean, to the rest of the brands within Swatch?
Breguet, Blancpain, Hamilton, yes, the rest of the
Yeah,
Swatch Group.
I have no idea. I mean, that's one of the benefits of being part of a group. They need to pull them along. I don't think it will look good, and I don't think it's the intention of Hayek the son or the daughter to be selling brands. I think they will just pull them along and create value for the industry and for themselves. The other thing that this report doesn't say is that the group Swatch benefits greatly from its production of movements, and everything is in-house. So there is this kind of cross-pollination that happens, which is unique in some ways, because of their domineering position in the caliber movement. Of course, they have announced a few years back that they will not be selling the ETA movement to outsiders, but
That
the fact,
transition has been, yeah, that transition has been taking a long time. It has been
yeah,
very long-winded, I have to say.
exactly.
But it did encourage a lot of the smaller brands to go their own way, to establish different kinds of coalitions, um, establish their own manufacturers for movement. So I think that gesture towards saying, okay, we are not sharing ETA, which is sitting on the heritage of Valjoux, which is sitting on the heritage of even Venus, for example, right? For those of us horological history geeks, um, that the fact that they said that, I think, once again, for whether it was intentional or not, really energized industry in terms of pooling their resources together and trying to generate alternatives, either at the level of creating manufacturers that source a number of different brands, or really going inwards and trying to find ways, if they're a boutique kind of operator, to genuinely make their in-house calibers by sourcing the parts. Professor, I think we had a great conversation again. We will pick up this thread and maybe talk a little further about how the luxury groups are being affected by these changes and trends, and perhaps also start our discussion of how the industry, in terms of means of distribution, in terms of creating new kinds of customers, broadening their customer bases, but also in terms of design and innovation, how the industry might be responding to the onset of the recession in Europe and beyond. That can be a good way of teasing our next episode, don't you think, Professor?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, Lord. Let's do that.
All right, sounds great. Thank you, everyone, for being here once again. Please hit the like button. It genuinely helps. It does make a difference. Subscribe if you haven't. If you're just stumbling upon this broadcast, we're here with Watch Talk every day. Sometimes it's a little lighter. We talk about the narrative surrounding watches, new releases, the horological history, and perhaps the emotional charge that brings us some of the most popular models today. We go through auctions, we preview auctions, we discuss some of the top lots at the end. Um, we also have this market talk where we touch base with an actual professor of economics who is also an industry insider, who gives us some idea about how the recent turns in the financial market affect the Swiss watch industry. And we also have shorter kinds of content. So keep coming back, keep sharing the links. And if you want to contribute in other ways, beyond increasing my reach, beyond helping me get to 1,000 subscribers, which will help me get the channel monetized, you can always contribute through Patreon, through PayPal, or through Cash App. The links are there. The information is in the crawling ticker and is included in the description. I wish you a great day ahead, Professor, and a good night to those of us in the Americas. Take care. See you soon again.